Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, The Great Customer Resignation, 7 Ways to Prevent Churn. In this webinar, we will uncover some of the findings that we discovered when we surveyed about 1,500 sales and marketing professionals around the globe, and we'll discuss what keeps them awake at night and go through tips and tricks and how to overcome some of the challenges. I do want to take a moment to do a few introductions. Today, you have 4 wonderful webinar hosts. First, I would like to introduce Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Liz is a seasoned marketing veteran and offers strategic guidance on the leadership, business transformation, and technology requirements to deliver on today's CX strategies. Next up, we have Claire Dorian, CMO at SugarCRM. Claire is a results-oriented, creative, and passionate marketing professional with a record of driving customer acquisition as well as brand and market awareness, working for B2B software companies of various sizes. And finally, you have Sarita Kincaid, VP of Corporate Communications. And my name is Sarah Friedlander Garcia, and I am the Director of Content and Creative at SugarCRM. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Claire, and she will take you through our content for today.
Thanks, Sarah, and welcome, Liz. Welcome, everybody. You heard Sarah say that, we did some research. I feel very, very passionately that, we have a duty of care to listen to the market and understand what it is that's keeping them awake at night. And that's why, actually, last year, for the first time here at Sugar, we launched a research survey. This year's our second rodeo. The difference being, last year we just spoke to salespeople, and this year, we spoke to both sales and marketing people because I think, as you and I know, Liz, that partnership is really, really important, to collective and business and customer success. And today, we're going to take you through some of those findings. As Sarah said, there were 1,500 people around the globe that we surveyed, notably in the UK, in Australia, Germany, and also in North America. And so what did we learn? Quite simply, we're burnt out. This pandemic has taken its toll. It's wreaking havoc. It has wreaked havoc. It continues, in my experience, to wreak havoc. Not just on sales quotas, importantly for the sales audience, but also, importantly for the customer, it's wreaking havoc on the experience that businesses are delivering and channeling through sales and marketing efforts. We heard several things and had several takeaways that you can see here. Sales and marketing, they're spending too much time on manual data entry and not able to focus on the conversations and the engagement that matters most. We heard too that we are fighting and balancing that conflicting leak, both at the beginning of the customer life cycle and when it comes to retention, we heard too, surprise, very loud and clear, this one, that all of that is impacting negatively the experience that customers are having, and actually almost all 8, 9 out of 10 surveys felt that all of these reasons that you see here were contributing to customers leaving in their droves. So life has not got any easier for us as practitioners in each of our respective disciplines in sales and marketing. But I think, frankly, if the last 2 years has taught us anything, it's that we do need to change, and we can change. And there's no better time than now, right, Liz, to do exactly that.
Now, we've just experienced so much change in the last 2 years. We now have the muscle memory on how to do it, right? We know how to get there. We know how to accelerate that. We know how to accelerate change and manifest it. So I think you're right. Now is the time to change and not assume that we can't change. Because I think that's the number one thing that tends to hold us back. That assumption that, and the assumption that the systems that we tend to use and leverage to facilitate this change, to facilitate engagement, that they haven't changed either. So lots to dig into.
Lots to dig into. And speaking of digging in, 7 reasons to churn, that's a whole lot of intel to share in frankly, what's going to be the next 35, 40 minutes. So I hope you all don't mind, but Liz and I made an executive decision, and we decided to really just dive in on 4 of those topics. And the reason why we chose data-driven decisions, making CRM accessible, organization alignment, and the promise that AI holds, as we heard from our respondents, is because we fundamentally believe that these are not just important to us in sales and marketing, but they are important enterprise-wide, right, Liz? And we got to get a grapple on them.
Yeah, this is the stuff that holds it all together, right? These are the things that everyone involved in CX, from sales to service to marketing, everyone's looking at these things. And if they're not, that's probably the first place we need to start. So that tends to be the first issue. So absolutely, these were the ones that jumped out at me too, Claire.
Good stuff. All right, so let's start out then looking at data-driven decisions and hear exactly what we heard from those 1,500 sales and marketing people around the globe. Well, what do you know? 2 decades later, in a market that has been around forever, 3/4 of our audience continue to believe that, while it's really important to be able to see and action the insights about customer information, about customer engagement, as you can see here, far too many of them still feel like they don't have that at their fingertips. And, data is both the art and the science of customer experience, isn't it, Liz? It's the thing that allows you to really understand engagement, to predict engagement, to take the guesswork out of how you are liaising, with your customers throughout the life cycle. So, Liz, I'm going to come to you because does this surprise you at all?
No, I wish it did. I really wish when we surveyed sales and marketing people that, like, I know we're going to hit a day when, Claire, you and I are like sitting over coffee and we're like, oh my God, did you see that survey where everyone just gets along and people are totally like, they're working on it together. It's like this feels like a really decades old problem. And because it feels that way, we have to come to an understanding that this divide between sales and marketing isn't just about systems. It isn't just about leads. It isn't just about quotas. It isn't just about compensation. I think we tend to focus on the thing at hand, right? Or the answer that's on the top of the list. This divide runs deep, right? And part of the issue is the culture of the organization hasn't shifted to actually value data and the intelligence that can actually help sales and help marketing be better at what they fundamentally do, sell and market, right? It's not this like rocket science to try to figure out what we all do here, right? But because we tend to look at data as a metric in marketing, let's take, for example, and Claire, you and I know this very well, right? As marketers, for a really long time, data was that rear view mirror of metrics where we could say, oh my God, that's so awesome. We got 18% success rate on emails. Right. And like we could celebrate that for some reason. But it was this very rear view mirror metric. The beauty of being a data-driven organization is that you've turned that corner. You've turned the corner so that you're not looking in the rear view mirror as much. You're using that to substantiate your past business. You're using that to prove your KPIs. All of that stuff is awesome. But today's data that is in service of the seller, that is in service of the marketer, is actually bubbling up insights to say, hey, where should you sell next? Where is this going to close next? Like, where is the next opportunity? Where should we be looking? It's about the where and the how to be successful, not, oh, yay, you were successful. It's not as passive. Today's data-driven decisions are active. So you have to ask yourself, I think the first question that I hope everyone on this webinar asks is, okay, if we're data-driven, because let's be honest, like we can go onto everyone's LinkedIn profile and they're going to have that line, data-driven blank, like data-driven marketer, data-driven seller, everyone's got it. It's okay, it's all right, no one has to delete it. But are we actually operating in a culture of metrics or are we operating in a culture of data, right? And if there's a big hint. If you're operating in a culture of metrics, I guarantee you're also asking all of your sales and marketing people to undergo the drudgery of data cleanup, right? Like you are handing them 90 million Excel spreadsheets and being like, oh, are things not in the right column? Oopsie. Sorry, you couldn't do that mail merge because you actually sent it to dear Mr. Dan. We all know that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what we also have to understand is that being data-driven is as much a strategy and a culture shift as it is about technology and the raw material. And that when we ask people to do all of these mundane tasks around, like, listen, 75% say they don't have a consolidated view of the customer, right? So what are they trying to do? They're spending time trying to pull all that in themselves. That means they're not selling, they're not marketing, they're not being creative, they're not problem solving, they're not building relationships. And when they're not successful, guess what all of our people do? They quit. Right? They leave. Oh my gosh, it's like it's not that hard. So I think we need to start looking for those little things that we can start to do to truly reach a point of being data and intelligence driven around a common core of data and intelligence.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well, it's interesting that you say, the team will quit. The customers quit, as our survey told us, right? Because, too often, if you don't have the right intel at your fingertips, in marketing, you launch a campaign to a segment that's highly dissatisfied. Who wants to find themselves in that situation, right?
Right.
You try to sell and sell and sell again to the wrong kind of ideal customer profile. Again, no salesperson is going to make their quota, in that kind of Groundhog Day, right? So it inhibits not only your business success, but it does have a material effect on, the experience that you offer your customer as well.
The two things are totally intertwined, right? Like imagine an angry customer calls in to your customer support line and they are greeted with an angry, bored, frustrated person who's fighting with all of the tools and technology just to figure out who this customer is, right? We're kind of setting ourselves up for this type of disaster. And then we look at our churn numbers and we're like, gosh, I wonder why our customers keep, like, listen, churn is a reality of business. Not being able to do something about it, not having the data that you feel helpless that you're going to miss your quota. You are missing data and you don't know what to do with it. That feeling of helplessness will always lead to a feeling of hopelessness. And that is not how we need to support any of our customers in a data-driven environment.
No, it really isn't. All right, so let's move along then from data to something that I think, again, came across loud and clear. Huge. That having tools that are accessible, intuitive, that are designed to work the way that I work, as opposed to designed the way the engineer that built the system thinks it should work. And this was also something that our audience for this survey were very, very vocal about, this being something that is inhibiting them. And so, we're 40 minutes into our webinar today. And so we're going to run a poll, Liz. We're actually going to ask our audience here, because we want to understand how they feel about their CRM, right? So here's the question for you all to answer. So on a typical work week, how much time do you spend in your CRM reviewing your CRM data? Quarter of your time, quarter to half of your time, half to 3/4 of your time, or heaven forbid, 3/4 to 100% of your time. And we will wait for the responses here, right?
Can you imagine if you're spending 80% of your time fighting with your CRM? Like I look at that and I'm like, oh gosh, please. I really hope for anyone who is, I kind of feel like we need to offer anyone who answers that question, like, you're getting a hug. I'll send you a virtual one. Like, I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That just feels miserable.
Maybe they need to become a stat in their great employee resignation, right? I think.
Right. Well, I think those are probably the people who are starting. Like, they're the ones that are like right now Googling, like, right, I really don't need to do that. But wow, it just, that feels like a lot.
It does.
Even
It does.
51%,
All right.
like 51% feels like a lot too. I don't know.
It does. It does. All right. So we've given you, I think, enough time to respond here. So let's see how people fared. Huh.
Okay.
That's interesting, I think.
That is.
A high percentage, less than a quarter of their time.
That's a lot. I was not expecting that.
Me neither. Me neither.
Yeah, I was honestly expecting the 26. I was expecting about maybe like okay, you're probably spending about like 30%, but it kind of does. Gosh, I kind of feel like I'm about to make a lot of assumptions about the 71%. So if there's anyone live, if I'm completely missing the mark on my assumption here, throw that into the questions and we could totally address it. But it kind of feels like I'm going to spend that. I'm wondering if the reason why it's 0 to 25% spending and reviewing their CRM data is that, are they spending less time because the CRM is up-leveling more intelligent recommendations so they can leave and they can go do the other things. They can go do the work that is at hand. Or is it really just, my fear is that if someone's spending less than 1/4% of their time in CRM, they're like, this is useless. It doesn't give me anything. I'm bouncing out. That becomes the question.
That's my fear, Liz, as well. And in fact, that's the exact same fear that we uncovered, as part of our research, right? Because, what we heard was, lots of frustration from, you can see it right here. More than 3/4 of those 1,500 people that we surveyed, have found themselves frustrated by their CRM. It's either too complex, it's not intuitive enough. As I said earlier, it's not working, the way that, they would like to. What's interesting as well to me is, we don't actually have this stat here, but, 2/3 of our audience also express frustration at the admin burden explicitly that their CRM, is putting on them. And I think, probably most shocking of all is the belief that, CRM's actually wasting them money. I think some 60-odd% of people we asked just felt it wasn't a valuable use of their budget and their dollars. So how can that be, Liz? How can that be in a market that has been around for 2 decades?
Well, I think that's part of it, right? It's kind of like the answer and the question. I think that what has happened for a lot of organizations specific to CRM is that they have either modernized the tool and not modernized the strategy for the utilization of the tool, or vice versa. They've modernized how teams work. They've modernized how they're compensated, how they're engaging and relating with the customers. They've maybe even modernized other tools that sit around the CX ecosystem, but CRM has largely stayed the same. And it has stayed that kind of monolithic, tattletale. Gosh, that's so terrible to say out loud, but it kind of feels like in some organizations, that's how CRM is used, right? And I'm a firm believer that origin stories matter, right? I think it's important to know how Wolverine became Wolverine, right? Origin stories matter for me. And I think that when we really take a hard look at CRM's origin story, that origin story is firmly rooted in Salesforce automation, right? And I think that when we started to migrate a tool that was really originally intended to help our sellers have a clear picture of the transactional dynamic and relationship with their customer. It suddenly morphed into this kind of broader category of customer relationship management, right? But we kept on holding on to that hope that this new tool was going to help our sellers. But then we just kind of started building all this stuff around it. And then all of a sudden managers started CRM to say, you're not spending enough time selling. You're not spending enough time looking at what segment it kind of became this really weird, sales overlord scenario. And that's not the technology's fault. Let's be very clear about that. That's management fault. That's strategy's fault. And I think that as we were so busy trying to fix the broken strategy and fix the broken culture, we just let the technology sit and fester. So while the market was innovating, the technology being implemented hadn't really been. And I think that what's happening now is that both our employees and our customers are questioning that reality of, does it really have to be this way, right? Because our customers are absolutely thinking like, I do business with you, brand, whatever. Why is it that when I engage with you in different places, when I need something, you treat me like a completely different person? It's because all of these different systems and all of these different systems of record have a different vantage point and a different collection of data, right? How many times have you gone into a CRM system and typed in someone's name and found 15 records because it got started by 15 different, right? Like, hello. So that creates a dynamic where then the employee is at the brunt of that. Like they're the one on the phone being like, why didn't you know I just bought that? Yeah. So they're both beginning to question this reality of, well, why does the system do this, right? And I think it's really important to take that step back. I love that you guys asked about accessibility because I think it's really important, but we have to remember that it's not just about access. I think a lot of people talk about accessing CRM and how important it is to get there. And so then they go, oh, well, we have a mobile application, so ergo, CRM is totally accessible to everyone. It's not just about being able to get into the app, right? It's not being able to get into the interface. It's about when that employee, whether they are in sales, service, or marketing, wherever they sit in the organization, if they are part of that CX front line, and the moment they log in, is the first thing that they see tailored to how that person works. Is the data contextual? Is the data relevant? Like we focus on personalization for our customers so much, we forget to focus on personalization for our people who are our internal customers. So is that first dashboard that they see one that gets their blood pumping in the morning? Like, yeah, that's where my campaigns are. That's where my opportunities are. Like, that's where these are the close rate. These are people I have to contact immediately. Is that first look helping our sellers, or is it another reminder that they've got a frustrating day ahead of them? And the only way we get to the answers to that is actually listening to what is wanted. What do the sellers want to have as that first dashboard? What do the marketers want to have? Or giving them the ability to change that canvas themselves, right? Giving the admin the ability to change that canvas themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too, just to sort of speak to that point, that you can see there on the left-hand side of the slide, about half of our audience, they're unable to make those customizations, which only contributes further to that frustration. But Liz, you touched on a couple of things there beyond accessibility, and that's actually a really nice segue into our third topic, which is one of organizational alignment, right?
I totally even forgot. I got so excited about the other accessibility stuff. This is why you guys probably just will never want me to be on a webinar again, because I totally forgot to share this, but I'm going to share it really fast. Oh my gosh. I got so excited about what we were talking about, Claire. I warned everyone that this was going to happen, that we were going to get so into conversation that I would totally forget what I sent you guys. Totally just happened. Live here on a webinar. Okay, so listen, here's something that I wanted to share with you guys really quickly, especially as for folks who are looking at CRM tools. Last year, I had the audacity to ask people what they wanted. Oh my gosh. So I asked a bunch of CMOs, what are you looking for in technology? And the responses were not that unusual, right? Lots of folks looking at customer data platforms, lots of people looking at analytics, customer experience, revenue, videos. We're looking at the kind of tool set that makes marketing work, right? So not really surprising. But when I asked what's critical to success, what's the one tool that you're going to need to make sure that you can reach your mandate of driving growth for the organization, since that's what the CMO's role job is, correct, Claire? Anyway, so I was like, yes, this is my job. So when we start to talk about reaching that mandate, the number one thing they need is something that actually helps them track and optimize revenue, right? So again, CRM, not the tool that everyone's looking for. They're trying to shift the center of gravity to something that works because the feeling is CRM does not work for them, right? But when you start to talk about what is a tool that fundamentally can collect and aggregate, centralize and normalize customer data and give a picture of that customer's relationship with the organization and with all their partners and track revenue, intuitively, my mind goes to CRM. right? It goes to like, well, of course, that should be able to accomplish all of these things.
Yeah.
So why isn't it? And I think that becomes a really big question, because I would posit that a lot of the reason why people are not looking at CRM, we're tired of ripping and replacing it, right? Like we're exhausted by it because it's been decades, but it's because they don't get access to the right things that they need. It's all the things. So if we look at the next slide, like remember those 3 data points that are on the left there, right? Because it really is about not being able to get to the data. It's not being able to get to the right intelligence. It's not being able to have helpful answers. The interesting thing I will say, and if we go to the next slide that kind of goes back to your answers, the last point I want to make about your the accessibility stuff, the first stat there, 76% say their biggest frustration with CRM is it's either too complex. Isn't it a little interesting that 71% of our audience watching this webinar today, almost very similar number, is spending what we both felt was almost next to no time in our CRM system?
Yeah.
So I wonder how many of that 71% is actually like, listen, I bounce in, I get the numbers that I want, I get the numbers that I know how to find because I've worked around the system, and then I'm out. I'm using other systems because this isn't giving me what I need. I need revenue, I need CDP, like I'm trying to find the workaround. So it's the fact that those 2 numbers are so similar. I'm like,
interesting correlation right there, huh? Interesting correlation. Yeah. Well, let's shift gears. Organization alignment. I was ahead of myself earlier, so I apologize. This is critical, right? Because, you know, you said it at the offset. You can have all the right data, access to the right data in context, you know, in a way that makes sense to you and your customer. You know, you might have the most magical set of systems, you know, on the planet to facilitate that engagement. But this really matters, doesn't it, Liz? And so we're going to come to the audience today with another poll. We're halfway through the webinar, so it's time to
all right, here we go.
And we want to know. Yeah, we want to know, you know, the topic of sales and marketing alignment is nothing new here, but we want to know what's preventing, you know, and stopping you from gaining alignment as sales and marketing professionals. Is it tools? Is it metrics? Is it communication? Or is it some combination of all of the above? What do you think we're going to hear here, Les?
Oh, gosh, you know, my knee-jerk reaction is all of the above, because when I go back into that world of running a sales and marketing team, I kind of feel like it's always been like all of these things mashed up like a really mean stew, right? Like it's like and it's not so, you know, like for me, it's the systems that aren't integrated are oftentimes the systems that sit so far outside of marketing but have some of the most critical data. Especially for sales and marketing teams like service and support, right? When those systems aren't integrated, and so you don't really have a full view of the front line of CX and what's actually happening in that engagement dynamic. But, you know, incentivized by different goals, that's a big one too. Like, you know, sales is compensated by month or by quarter, marketing's compensated by year. How do you get those calendars to line up? That's a big issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and so is the lack of common processes. I mean, Liz, I'm sure the many customers you've spoken to, you know, is there a common definition of a lead, an MQL, a SAL, you know?
Gosh, right? It's like there's no, but I also think there's that idea that somehow new technology can somehow magically replace bad process, right? So even if you don't have, you know, like if you have a bad process and it's a common process, then yikes, like you're never gonna get there. But I would venture to guess that a lot of times these all nest into one another. So that it's why I kind of come back to the like all of the above, right? Because when your systems aren't integrated and you don't have those connected systems, you really have no motivation or no automated fashion where you can share data. Right? You're likely sending spreadsheets to each other, or, you know, it's all you're sharing by PowerPoint. There's no KPIs that actually say, hey, what happens when you do share data? So like all of those things, it feels like they all like it's like the meanest corporate nesting doll ever. Like they all
Well, let's see if indeed our audience too feel like these all nest together, and let's see how folks. Ooh. You guys are surprising us today.
Yeah, gosh, wow. Like, that's interesting. It's really interesting because I listen, if there is a common truth in any industry or in any setting, money makes the world go round, right? And hey, there's nothing, like, we're all here because we want to be in the business of doing better at business, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But so I think it's interesting that the biggest problem and the misalignment is around different goals and different KPIs, because that tends to lead to different compensation. That tends to like, that can be at the heart of it, because if you don't have, if you have incompatible KPIs, how in the world are you going to be willing to talk to someone across that fence? Like, why are you going to work to get better processes? That's interesting.
It is.
I thought this was really fun. I'm not going to lie.
I know, right? But you know what's even more interesting is if we go to the slide and we look at our 1,500 research respondents, we actually saw a little bit of a different order here. You know, our audience today had KPIs out top, system, then comms. And we heard from the 1,500 folks we surveyed, KPIs was the number one, followed by systems, followed by core communication. So a little bit of a flip-flop between... Yeah,
no, totally what happened here. We gave them the all of the above. So I guess if we took out that 29%, we'd probably see incompatible KPIs as the top one. So yeah, that's interesting.
But you know, Liz, why is it that, you know, we still continue to be plagued by some of these age-old problems? Right. I mean, you know, I wouldn't say that conversations with, you know, sales and marketing about KPIs and driving alignment, that's nothing new. So why are we still here?
Well, I mean, I think that the fundamental truth is that organizational change is hard. And when we engage in sea change and organization and culture change, we tend to actually just rebrand what we've always been doing, and then go back and repeat the process when we start to talk about organizational change. So when you think back, and I would say to anyone watching this, go back and think about maybe the big digital transformation effort you embarked on 5 years ago, right? And take a good hard look at that. Was that truly transformational, where the technology enabled the organizational processes and operations to fundamentally change? Or did you just make the old process faster? And I would venture to guess about 80% of people just made the old process faster and then wondered why a new process didn't just kind of emerge. And so we're kind of still stuck in this conversation. I mean, go to any bookstore, like now that we're all going back to airports, like go to the Hudson bookseller, because they have like that ginormous, abnormally large section of like business books. Go look for the shelf on sales and marketing, because it's still there, right? And it's been there for a decade. I mean, remember when the books were out, like sales is from Venus and marketing is from Mars, or whoever got to live on whichever planet, right? Like whoever. But we're still having that discussion, like the two people are so fundamentally different. Like a seller and a marketer are such fundamentally different archetypes that we can't possibly come up with a shared language for them. And we all know that's nonsense. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? Because we are both in the job of transactions. Sales is doing it with like a known currency. Marketing is doing it with space and brand and story. And arguably support is in there with us, right? They are really in that kind of tug of war, that face-to-face delivery or voice-to-voice delivery of experience. So there's probably more that is common ground between us, but when you don't have those shared KPIs, right? When you are not incentivized to reach common goals and common wins, you're really gonna have a hard time seeing that. And here's what's really interesting. I don't think in the modern organization, we see the people being the problem, right? So, okay, no one tweet this, Okay, I can't stop any of you from tweeting this, but I'm just going to say, I have pulled a little data for you guys, just because you came here to spend a little time with Claire and myself today. I am right in the middle of fielding our CMO 2022 survey. And this year I kind of asked a bit of a different question, because we also have to, much like I took Sugar's lead here, I didn't just survey marketers. I went out and included sales and digital and customer experience and customer service folks. And I asked, in the question I asked was, what's happening within your CX team, within your internal CX ecosystem? Who's a partner, who's a collaborator, who's a roadblock, and who's missing in action, right? And when you look at the chief customer officer, when you look at the sales team, when you look at customer and support, by and large, our audience does not see them really as truly being missing in action or a roadblock. Okay, except for that little yellow sliver on the sales team who's like a little bit of a roadblock. But for the most part, for the most part, they're collaborators, right? For the most part, overwhelmingly, the chief customer officer is a partner in crime to the CMO, the CDO, the chief experience officer in getting experience strategy up and out the door. So it's really not so much about, I would say, the people partnership anymore. There's something else going on here. Okay, now, and just a little hint, there is someone who is overwhelmingly missing in action, and I will release that when we release all of the data, but it absolutely has to deal with people again. So when we start to think about all the focus we are paying on sales and marketing the people, it feels like we're missing something. And I think it goes back to the results, right? So if we go back to the results slide, we have this picture of, listen, we don't have a common set of KPIs, but we don't have a common set of KPIs that is visible to everyone through the systems everyone is using, right? Like we're pretending like this is just going to be at an SKO. Like we're gonna go to a sales kickoff meeting. We're gonna show the slide of our common goals, and it's gonna be good to each other. That's all we needed to do, right? Like we've aligned everyone. Yeah. That's not gonna do it, right? We need to have the system. So the question becomes, does your CRM solution and all of the integrated technologies that then connect via API in that composable system and feed into and draw from your system, are those internal assets aligned? Does sales have visibility into support? Does marketing have visibility to align with sales so they can see that running KPI, so they can see where as a team we are all headed? It's not just about delivering that in a PowerPoint every quarter. It's about giving that accessibility to success, right?
Totally. And I can identify that, with that as well. I'll go back to the earlier example that we shared. In marketing, there would be nothing worse than for me to launch a campaign when we're running some sort of customer retention strategy out of our customer service group, communicating to the exact same set of customers. And so alignment isn't just about the KPIs, the communication and the process. It's about the execution as well. Because you can have all, 3 out of those 4 things, but execution can trip you up. And that's where having visibility into the communications that are going out, the engagement that's being seen across the life cycle of the customer just becomes really, really valuable to your success, right?
Yeah. And I think what you just hit on is so fundamental to customer experience strategy, right? Because when we think about our customer experience strategy, we have to be thinking it from the customer's point of view. It's not our experience to force onto a customer, right? Customer experience has always been misnamed as a practice and as an idea within an organization. It should be customers' '(S) experience. It's their experience. So if we don't have a system that allows us to see that I've been pelting poor Claire from 3 different parts of my organization with a sales pitch that came from my sales enablement technology, all of my marketing promotions, because Claire fits perfectly into this one segment that I have identified. And you know what? I might have a super intelligent system. I might be able to micro segment down to the hyper personalized level. So I know exactly when you are in your moment of need, and I can deliver that. Okay, great. So you know what? Service can too, and they just did 10 times. If I can't see that you're being bombarded by 15 different messages that might all be personalized, they might all be contextual, But what we're forgetting is, because we can't all see that, because we don't center our thinking around the customer and we center our thinking around the transaction or the selling unit, we're delivering a negative customer's experience in our effort to drive our customer experience KPIs. This doesn't work.
It is. All right, it's time to turn our attention to the future. And one of the areas that we explored, unsurprisingly, with our audience was the notion of AI and artificial intelligence, and really what we wanted to understand there were, does it offer hope? Does it offer promise? Is it being adopted? And so before we share what our 1,500 sales and marketing professionals said, we're going to come to the audience again and ask you, whether artificial intelligence is something that you are using to augment, complement, your sales and marketing processes. And this is a really straightforward poll question for y'all. It's a yes, no. I don't know.
I'm fairly certain that it's going to be like, if we think it's yes, everyone's going to answer no. That's just what's going to happen. I just know it.
You think it's that divisive?
I just think that everyone's trying to mess with me because they know it's early in the morning and I haven't quite finished my full cup of coffee. So I think everyone's coming for me, Claire.
Well, I got my tea, so I can't blame lack of caffeine, although less caffeine than a coffee. I'm going to be really... Go on.
Yeah, go for it. Well, I was going to say, like, if I was answering this question, it's like I'm looking at this and I'm like, my honest answer might be I don't know, right? Because I think in a lot of tools today, we are using AI without necessarily knowing it, right? Yeah. Like just some of the tools that might up level, what movie I want to see, or what my calendar is going to be today, so it shifts focus time around, like things like that, like have just become so ingrained into what we do that I don't necessarily know if we're intentionally using it. But I think that the general, like, my guess here is going to be that most people are currently using it but want to use it differently or better, or I don't know. This is going to be interesting. I'm just going to say no. Everyone's going to answer no, because I don't think that I'm just going to say that, since everyone's messing with me today. So everyone's going to clearly answer.
Well, let's not suspend you any further, Liz. Let's jump to what we heard.
Oh, that's close.
Interesting. Close. Really, really close.
I'm surprised by that. I think it's great. I would be super curious, and gosh, if anyone's bold enough to just go ahead and drop their comment in the question box, please go ahead and do it. Because my question is, do you actually like using AI to augment your sales and marketing processes, right? Because for those 50%, like how's it going? Like that because I think that's really interesting. I mean, I like it. I think it's great. It's a great tool, and absolutely we should be using it. But I'm super interested. If someone answered yes and they want to go ahead and drop something in the questions, let us know how it's going.
Yeah, definitely. And here's what's interesting, actually, Liz. If we jump back to the slides, and maybe this is time of day, end of day for our friends in Europe, beginning of the day, or mid-morning coffee break for some of the folks here in North America. But, far more of the 1,500 folks we surveyed actually indicated to us that, AI holds promise for them. This is something that they are either using or looking to use to really help complement, what it is that they're doing from a sales and marketing perspective. And interestingly enough, we actually did ask them to qualify, are there any particular use cases where you're finding that to be of greater value? And you can see right here, automated email, surprise, surprise. Conversational AI, to drive that and interaction and engagement, probably through the website for those of us that are in marketing, right? But importantly, I think for business growth, which, coming out the back of the pandemic is what we are all laser focused on, opportunity close prediction. So helping them align and focus energy and effort around where most value can be derived, right, Liz?
I'm kind of surprised that so here's what I like. Okay, if I could like pretend I'm AI and predict things next year when you guys do this survey, that's the one I'm going to be looking at, right? Are people leveraging AI less to just automate the repeatable, less to predict the repeatable, and instead are people starting to shift and look at AI as that revenue assistant, right? Like, how do I predict close? How do I start to predict churn? How can I proactively either mitigate and manage that churn if it's something I can, or is there a leading indicator that AI can see because it can bring in so much data that it says, listen, this one's going to churn anyway. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money, right? Because there are those ones, right? There are your sleeping dogs, and then there are your rage-filled, I'm going to leave just so I can leave, and I'm going to come back in a month, right? We all know that we've got those customers. AI can start to crunch that data and see those correlations. But it kind of brings me to, when I saw this data, and when you guys shared with this data with me beforehand, the number one thing I thought of was, like, listen, fundamentally, there are typically two big reasons why AI fails within an organization, right? And that's either because you didn't have a strategy around why you were applying it, or you didn't give it enough data, right? Like, I think when we think about AI, we imagine AI to be this like fully formed human adult who is like our peer, who we are offloading work to. So if I can automate these emails as the thank you after the sales transaction, AI, like Sally will take care of that. Like we even name our AIs, right? Like we name but the reality is like, okay, AI is like a petulant toddler right now. Like they're like my 5-year-old, right? Like they have learned some stuff. They have gotten really good at the repeatable task of tying their shoelace, but it's not like they're going out there and doing origami yet. Like they're still just tying their shoelace. Right. So what we're starting to see in AI is as we continue to get this really robust business graph together, so it has enough data to learn and it has enough data to up level the insights and the intelligence that we need it to. Right. And here's the hint. It's never going to come just from one department. When I say enough data, I'm not saying like, give it more marketing data. Like, God, no. Like, no, give it more sales data, give it more service data, like give it ERP data, give it finance data, like give it all the data, train it to know your business, to know your language, to know your customer. When you get that massive set of data that makes your mind twitch because we mere mortals cannot consume that much data, that's kind of when you're getting to what AI needs, right? Like that's your starting point. So what we're starting to see is AI shift from that toddler phase into the big kid phase, where they're starting to not only tie their own shoes, but they're also starting to say, hey, you know what? I've noticed everyone's wearing red shoes today. I think I want to wear red shoes. Or they're starting to realize and see things like, hey, when you contact this prospect 2 days earlier than when you've set up on your calendar, on your normal process, you're actually more successful in closing. So, hey, let's move up all of your calls. Like it's beginning to identify patterns and opportunities and up level those to the people that AI has been trained in service of. And so I think that's what we're starting to see, because again, that's where the strategy and the quantity of data actually start to intersect. When you don't have either and they don't intersect, your AI project will more than likely fail. I hate to be the harbinger of bad news.
And I think, and just to add to that, I think it's not just where your data and your strategy don't intersect. It's where you're treating AI as something separate and disconnected, likely totally distinct tool. And therefore you're asking your people to work harder to understand the light that AI is trying to shine on something they should be doing but aren't, right? And so, as you think through how, what particular business pain points and challenges, whether it's preventing customer churn, focusing your sellers on the right kind and right size shape of opportunities, whether it's the marketing segment where you stand the most chance of success. Whatever that business pain point is that you are trying to tackle with think about how it is embedded into the way your people work, the way your customers work.
Right. There's nothing more frustrating for people who come in and are like, okay, I've opened up this system. Oh, now let me go check the chatbot. What? Like,
yeah.
Like, what? What do you mean? You got to go check it? Where you've got all these different points, and it's just like this random acts of experience that are never going to come together. But I think the other thing to really remember is that CX, AI, all of these things, these are strategies first, technologies and implementation second. Right? It is not a Ron Popeil chicken machine. Like, no one is sitting in your office shouting, set it and forget it. No one. Like, stop it. Like, it just isn't. So I think that, it's not just like, oh, we've given it some data, we can turn it on now.
Exactly. And that, Liz, seems to be a really good note to start to wrap up our webinar. I think it'd be fair to say that, we might have scared some people today, revisiting some of the challenges that perhaps we thought were challenges of yesteryear, but are very, very real, dilemmas that we face, as marketers and sales today, whether it's a leaky funnel, because leads aren't getting qualified right, whether it's customer churn that's, crucifying any efforts to acquire customers. I think at the end of the day, our ask of you as an audience, as you think about embarking on any CRM project, strategy, data, alignment, people, technology, and process, it all matters. There is no silver bullet. There is no singular silver bullet in that list of 6-7 things that you need to work through. So ask yourself, where is the biggest pain point that we need to challenge? If you are indeed thinking of AI, think about how you embed it. And because winning strategies require answers and alignment on all of those tough topics. And so with that, Liz, I want to thank you for your time, and more detail around the research is coming to you with the webinar on demand, in the webinar on demand email. So if you're curious about the other topics as well that we didn't cover today, that's all covered in the report. Be in your inboxes here shortly.
I feel like I should jump in and just say, I'm going to ask Claire a question instead now. So much for all of you asking that question, but I'm gonna take a greedy moment because I'm allowed to, and I totally can. So here's my question for you. I think that a lot of times, you have proven time and time again to be a successful CMO. You and I have known each other for quite some time. What are kind of the first things that you look at when you're being asked to tackle one of these transformation projects that really centers around customer data and making that something that you're leaning forward with? Because I think a lot of times it's really easy to say, oh, I'm gonna change the way I think about my CRM because I want to be data driven. It's a lot harder to execute. So what are kind of like the first thing you've had to think about when you've kind of pushed that forward?
Using these ears, listening. I've as data driven as I am, because I do love data. I don't necessarily love Excel, but I do love what data can help me see. But I think, as you embark on that journey, I think the most important thing to do is to listen. What are the problems that we're trying to solve here? And then use data to support what it is that you have heard before you even make recommendation on how to move forward. I think we often underutilize our ears and our ability to listen with the stakeholders that we're trying to bring on the journey. But what I have found is that if you take the time to listen, that sets the stall out, and sort of sets the tone for the project moving forward, that you value others' opinion. And it may not be right, and the data may disprove what it is that they are telling you, but they feel a sense of obligation and commitment to participate moving forward because you did take the time. So I would always say,
I love
listen
that.
first.
I love that. But I also think it's so interesting because you've done this survey twice now. right? Like, right, you've done it twice. And so you started with talking about sales, and I remember the first study. So like, listen, because I'm a nerdy data report nerd. So I'll read anything that comes into my email. And so I love reading these types of studies, right? So I remember there was a lot around kind of that frustration of wasted time, the frustration of lost revenue. Did you see that again with some of the because I would assume that the marketers are also feeling that frustration. And I think we saw that in this point. I'm super interested. Are you going to ask service if they're as frustrated next year? Can I ask for a sneak? Is that rude of me? Again, everyone who's attending live, I'm so sorry, I'm hogging all the questions, but I'm are you doing that next year?
Well, let me answer that quickly, and then I think, Sarah, you might have a couple of questions from the audience for us. So the first answer is, actually, the level of frustration went up year over year as we incorporated our marketing audience. Yeah, some 7% year over year. So, I would say that we still have a job to do there. And then to answer your question, yes, we will likely be talking to our service counterparts as part of our endeavor next year to round out the picture, and also to see, are there any differences of opinion that, we need to work hard to reconcile to really overcome some of the challenges that are inhibiting all three groups, frankly, from giving the customers what they need. So, Sarah, coming to you.
Hey, Sarah.
Are there any questions?
I love, Liz, that you asked that question, because that was literally a question that somebody asked. So that's amazing.
Awesome.
There you go.
Going back to the report, Claire, I have a couple questions that came in for you. So did you, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but did you see any major year-over-year differences from the two reports?
Yes, we did. So I mentioned that first one, that we saw an increase in the number of folks who felt like their CRM system couldn't be customized year over year. And we also saw that, I guess, we went from something like 50% to 58% of our respondents, reported that customer churn has gone up. No surprise, it was a pandemic. So I don't think that was, altogether too surprising for us, Sarah. What else did we see? I will say, because we surveyed a different audience year over year, we talked about last year we spoke to just sales. This year we spoke to sales and marketing. There were just a couple of differences, actually far fewer differences of opinion, I think, than we might have expected going into the survey. So firstly, one of the areas was processes and data. I think our sales friends are a little less optimistic about alignment and ability to see, data that helps them be successful in their jobs than their marketing counterparts. And I think that's culture, attitude, more than anything. And also, we saw a higher degree of optimism, I think, from our marketing friends about the promise that AI holds, and more use cases, it being applied to more use cases. And Liz, I don't know if you, any opinions to offer on that.
That makes a lot of sense to me, actually, because I think that for the most part, a lot of marketing tools have applied AI in more ways that directly either impact that connection with the customer or are up-leveling and helping marketers make smarter choices about when to send, what to put in the subject line, dynamic emails. So I think we're seeing more application there, but that's shifting. I mean, I think we're really seeing everything from smart selling, smart tagging, journey optimization, revenue optimization, who to sell, when to sell, what package to put in. I think because of tools like
what to do next, what to do next in that sales cycle.
Right. I think that in the selling motion today, the big difference are some of the more advanced digital and dynamic tools, things like configure price quote, where you're actually asking your customer to tell you exactly what they want to buy, and they are doing it themselves. That's amazing signal that's coming in. And so that's just like an avalanche of data that AI is just gobbling up. And so we're seeing some really interesting applications from there.
Awesome. I think one of the things that, made me the most excited about like looking at all the research, who we surveyed is that it wasn't, it was a variety of different regions where we looked at the US, the UK, Germany, and Australia. So Claire, like,
Yeah.
what did you see about, the different regional variation there?
So interesting you say that. So I think one of the headlines by way of difference was customer turnover, based on survey responses. So the US, for example, we heard that businesses are losing nearly one in two customers that they gain, alarmingly. Yeah, while in the UK, that was 1 in 3, and in Germany and Australia, 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. So quite a difference in terms of retention there. And I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of flummoxed as to why that discrepancy. Liz, I don't know if there's anything you'd offer there by way of explanation.
I
the pandemic
think a lot of it. I think the pandemic affected us all, but I do think it affected us in different ways. I think that it heightened expectations and opened a lot of minds, I think especially here in the US and especially here in North America, around the capacity to jump quickly and the capacity to kind of leave quickly. I think digital commerce shifts where people were, there's an understanding that the old belief was if you made it really hard for people to leave, they wouldn't leave.
Yeah.
Right? Like if they were a subscription service and you make it really hard for them to no longer have that subscription, well, then they'll stay your customer forever. But they're going to have a horrible experience and they're going to hate you forever, right? They're going to find a way to leave and they're going to work even harder to leave. So you're going to see those churn numbers go up. I think that because of privacy regulations and some regulations around that dictate and demand processes, especially in Australia, especially in Germany, that transparency is there. And so some of that like shiftiness, I'm just going to say it, some of that shiftiness is gone specifically in those two regions because of their heightened demands on data and privacy. So I think that that's where you're kind of seeing that. I also think that in certain areas across Asia Pacific, digital and digitized commerce has been the norm, especially through mobile applications for quite some time. It hasn't necessarily come online to the degree that kind of Asia and to some degree Europe has experienced in North America. We had this like Renaissance level boom here in the US that was very different. So I think that that's kind of what we're seeing in that regard. But it's interesting. I say it'd be really interesting to track next year when we've kind of hit that post-pandemic wave. Now that everyone's settling into their digital reality, I think next year's is going to be really interesting to track.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And for inquiring minds, just to close this topic out, AI was the other area where we saw quite the regional difference. And again, a surprise to me. Australia led the charge in terms of adoption of AI to help solve certain use cases. So culturally, are they more positive, more gung-ho about net new technology? I'm not sure, but yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. I might have expected to see North America lead the charge there. Yeah.
Love it.
So I think, I know we're a little bit over, but I do want to close out on AI because I just find this so fascinating. But, for you, Liz, have you seen any best practices in the industry around AI? And I think, for some, just our customers, how can they even get started with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that you have to think about the processes and the change you want and that your people want and that your customers want, and then apply AI and the thinking and the up-leveled ideas that you can get from that. So I think just saying, I want a chatbot is not great if your customers do not necessarily have anything to chat with you about. You're not going to get anywhere with it. It's going to fail, right? So I think it's about really having that intelligent way to apply AI in the service of something truly meaningful. And I would say, don't worry about the data set first, right? Worry about the problem or the experience, like the problem you want to solve or the experience that you're looking to deliver. Really have a crystallized view of what that is and how it will impact and change your business, right? So have the impact metric first, so that when you start to apply it, you're like, oh, wow, I'm going to feed that data in there. I'm getting a little more. I'm going to feed more data in. And apologies, I thought the do not disturb was on. Anyway, so feed that in, make sure it's truly live, everyone. That's how that happened. But make sure that you have that. Make sure you have that strategy. Make sure that you have that data, and then apply it. Test it. It's the same thing that we do with everything. Test it and teach it, because AI is meant to be taught. AI is meant to learn. So as that keeps expanding and growing, you'll be able to kind of keep growing with that. But have that KPI in mind first of what problem you want to solve.
And I think the other thing I will add to that, Sarah, is, don't be scared. I think there's been a lot of rhetoric out there in the market about how AI and AI programs of work are costly and science projects. It does not have to be. It really doesn't have to be. And, by finding that singular business pain point, whether it's for your employee, your customer, or a combination of the two, start small, deliver impact, think big. And, I can't emphasize enough about embedding it into the context and the way that your people and your customers are working, so it doesn't feel separate and adjunct.
I love that start small, deliver impact. I think that's a perfect way to sum it up, with anything, where sometimes you just think, like, what if I just deliver everything all at once? And then I think that's just
It'll save the world.
Exactly.
So I wanted to thank you, both Liz and Claire, for joining. This was wonderful. To everyone that joined, also thank you, and we'll be sending out this via email shortly. And thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks everyone
for joining. Thanks, Liz. Cheers now. Bye-bye.